Welcome to the Minutes to Win It podcast. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay, and it's a monster 14-game slate tonight, and it's right after the All-Star break. We had the 3-game slate yesterday, which just looks absolutely – it's minimal compared to what tonight brings.
Yeah, this is gonna be do your Hail Marys, do whatever religious things that you do, because you're gonna need help if you're playing tournaments on this slate.
It's looking like it's gonna be a high-scoring night. You're looking at all these usual superstars that are in play all the time, and they're all in great matchups tonight. There's really about 5 or 6 really high-scoring games that are on our radars tonight, and just to run through those real quick, you're looking at Golden State, Portland, Denver, Sacramento, Houston, Phoenix, Philly, New Orleans, and Indiana and OKC is really your monster games to really target offense from.
Yeah, and there's definitely some value in those games as well. I think a good way to sort of attack a 14-game slate is to break it down into the few games that you like, and then even break it down maybe even a little further to maybe the top 2 or 3 games that you really like. I mean, this is basically what a football Sunday slate looks like. So take it in that context and sort of look at it in a more football aspect for tonight.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, obviously we don't have the week up leading to it where we can prepare ourselves, but I mean, that's a really good point, because I mean, if you look at how you attack football slates, you kind of throw out those games you're not even going to play anyway. They're low scoring. They're going to be defensive battles. You're just not going to play it because you rather attack the high scoring games. And I think that's just how it's going to be for tonight. So yeah, I definitely really like that analogy there.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, there are some other contrarian games that we're looking at. And you're kind of looking at Dallas, Orlando, New York, and Brooklyn, Charlotte, Milwaukee. I mean, those are kind of the ones. I guess you can say Minnesota and Memphis, just because we like a Minnesota guy that we'll talk about later down the line.
And obviously the trade deadline just happened. The All-Star break happened. So there's been quite a few mix-ups on these teams that don't – obviously there weren't any blockbuster trades, but this still shifts minutes. It still shifts players to different teams and kind of moves around roles. So we're in wait-and-see mode, but there's also some educated guesses you can make based off the moves. So that's kind of what we're going to be going through a little bit tonight.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you're looking at some guys, and mainly Markieff Morris is the one that shifts things around a lot that we'll really pay attention to, especially just because the Suns are just, I mean, decimated. You don't know who's playing. I mean, the backcourt's the only sure thing right now for them. So, the Morris deal really switches things around, and especially with Orlando, Tobias Harris to Detroit. Those are the 2 ones we're really going to be talking about to shift things around.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at that Phoenix team, so much usage was just pointed straight towards Morris that this is a really big shakeup for that roster, and it could just come crashing down, and they could end up just not winning more than 5 games the rest of the year. But if they are going to stay in a game, we're going to see a lot of this usage shift to that sort of Booker-Goodwin combo.
Yeah, definitely, and I think as things, maybe it'll take a few games, but hopefully we can get a clear situation of whether it's John Lure, whether it's Teletovic. I mean, maybe Len plays some more at the 4, gets a little bit, bigger bump in minutes. It's a great matchup to take some chances on if you wanted to do that, but you don't feel good about their floors in any of them because you don't know the situation.
Right.
But jumping into point guards, we'll get right to it. And the only real injury news, Brandon Knight is more questionable. I don't believe he's intending to play against Houston, but he has advanced from where he was before the break. You're still going to see Archie Goodwin and Devin Booker put up a ton of minutes. The other one is Jared Bayless is questionable, and we're kind of looking for value to really open up on this slate. And if Bayless does sit, you would see more minutes for OJ Mayo.
And also Tony Parker, if he doesn't play, Patty Mills. So, but to get to the top, Westbrook and Curry, we were kind of talking about this a little bit before the show. It's kind of tough to pay up for these higher end options. Do you think these guys are in play for you tonight, or are you fading them?
I don't see them making their way into too many of my lineups, just because, I mean, it's a 14-game slate. I'm not liking a lot of the value, which is kind of surprising. You would think a 14-game slate would bring a ton of value, but one, there's just not a lot of injuries. There's not a lot of recent injuries that are creating, there's the sites have adjusted to the pricing. We saw DK kind of release their pricing way late, same with FanDuel as they usually do. So they're well prepared. There's not a lot. So I think the mid-balanced range is really where it's at tonight. And if I am paying up, I really like Lillard at home against Golden State, who they're a good defensive team, but their pace of play, and they haven't been great against guards this season.
Yeah, and Lillard had 40, I believe, the last time he played Golden State. So at 9,200 on DraftKings, he's not a better option than Curry and Westbrook, but point per dollar, I mean, he's right there with them for me. And then you kind of look down a little bit. I love Rondo tonight. He's been extremely consistent, and I think I'm gravitating more towards cash games tomorrow, and he's definitely in play for me in that type of format.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you there. I think Rondo's one of my favorite options, and I mean, that game struck us as one of the more all-around guys we can grab. It's going to be close. We know that for sure. Both teams struggle to play any sort of defense whatsoever, so I really like Rondo at that price. I mean, he's obviously a triple-double upside, and before the break, I mean, he was absolutely dominating. I mean, you look at his assist rate, double digits of at least 15 assists in the last 4 games. So, I mean, his price really hasn't risen, so I'm kind of surprised by that.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at I think Rondo is going to be a little bit popular. I actually really like Kyle Lowry as a nice contrarian move at that similar price tag, and we have seen him hit that high ceiling that you need for tournaments, and he's shown it against Chicago this season. He's averaged 25, 9, 5 in 2 games against them. So Rowe's not a great defender. Chicago's been not too good against point guards this season. No Jimmy Butler is obviously a big hit to their defense. So Chicago should keep this one close, and you look at the Raptors, they should just be able to coast through and put up the points as they usually do.
And I think those two options kind of makes it tough to play Kemba Walker or Isaiah Thomas. I just think those two, they're not priced high enough, or Kemba and Isaiah aren't priced low enough to make them really options on the slate. But that's kind of where I'm at with that situation there.
Yeah, and I think we can kind of find that a lot tonight, going position by position, where you can kind of rule guys out just because they're priced so similar to others in just better spots. But if you're looking a little bit lower, I like that Philly New Orleans game. I think it's kind of going to be a little bit overlooked. But I mean, Ish Smith and Drew Holiday are both capable of putting up big upside points, and at those price tags in that matchup, I really like them for tournaments tonight. Not sure if I can trust them in cash, but that upside's there.
And Holiday is such a weird case right now because he's still not playing a ton of minutes, but he's just dominating when he's in there. So he's a little more volatile than you'd normally want to play in this big of a slate, but you kind of like that for tournaments anyway.
Yeah, I mean, the price tag of just 6,900 there on DK isn't bad at all, and a home matchup against Philly is going to be even better. So I do like him. I mean, you're kind of hoping. The peripheral stats there, his steals have been up 5-2, 3-2, 2 in the last 5 games there. So against the turnover-prone Philly squad, I mean, those can be there and can really heighten his floor as well.
And 3 straight games over 45 DraftKings points. So he's been killing it.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen Holiday do this season, but we also seen him where he goes for that 24 fantasy point game and just absolutely crushes your night. And I mean, as we mentioned, this 14-game slate, you can't have any weaknesses, and I think that's going to be the same way in cash. I mean, if you kind of have a player, maybe on another night where it's an 8 or 9 game slate, it's fine, but it's pretty risky if you're sitting with a guy who's below value tonight. But looking at lower guys, I think as far as value goes deep, there's not much, but there is a range here that we like. Emmanuel Mudiay, Deron Williams, and a guy you were talking about, Goran Dragic.
Right.
before we get going here, so you can talk about him.
And this is one of those where we're kind of speculating on how things are going to go with Miami right now, because obviously the Chris Bosh news is kind of big. Whiteside's out, so it's going to be very interesting what type of pace they play and how they sort of do things going forward. And one of the sort of things we could see is sort of Dragic take control of this offense and kind of push the pace a little bit more because the bigs are out. So that's one potential sort of situation that could happen there. It's not 100% to happen, but I think he's an interesting value right now just because there's so much usage just gone from that offense. It's a tough matchup tonight, but I'm intrigued, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, especially because Chris Bosh's news is unfortunate. It's also probably going to be something that could be long term. So you're kind of going to want to see how this one plays out. You could really see that small ball style where it's Dragic, Wade, Luol Deng, and Justice Winslow. They're playing 1 through 4, where they put Stoudemire at the 5, and then work him in, and then once Whiteside comes back, he plays center. So I think that's actually probably going to be how it goes. So it is one to keep an eye on, probably over the next few games to see how that really works out.
Mm-hmm. But obviously for tonight, Williams and Moutier are the stronger and safer plays. I think you're pretty much there with that as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's like you said, I mean, it's kind of a wait-and-see approach for some of these guys. And from what we've seen from Moutier and Duran, kind of more of a GPP guy, hits that higher upside. Does have a little bit lower floor, but with the way Moutier has been playing of late, I think he's a safe play in all formats. We were kind of iffy on him in tournaments just because that upside hasn't been there for most of the season, but he has come close to that 35 to 38 fantasy point range, and you can certainly hit that against Sacramento tonight.
Right, and in one respect, you're playing these GPPs knowing you have to hit absolutely everything, but in another respect, playing him, everything has to go right anyway. So if you're playing him, it's kind of like, all right, I need him to get that 35 to 38. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you there. If you're looking a little bit lower, Jeremy Lin's caught our eye. As far as minutes to go, just something to talk about because Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is out for the rest of the season. Should see Batum slip back over to the 3, which means he's going to probably move from shooting guard to small forward soon, depending on whenever the sites do that. But Lin should see a bump in minutes. You should see Charlotte go back to their usual small ways. Lin not really on my radar tonight with a tough, lengthier matchup against Milwaukee, but that's something to keep an eye out for the future.
Yeah, and another one of those to monitor for potentially their next game or something like that. Because, I mean, we've seen Lin pretty much dominate in certain games this year. So, and he's always going to be a good price. So that's definitely something to keep track of.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the last game, he played 28 minutes, came in and went 14, 5, and 4 with 3 steals on a block. So, he certainly can't produce across the board. But if you're looking at like kind of a punt play, I think Patty Mills is kind of the guy I'm on. Obviously, he's coming off a monster game with Parker where he sat out and he played 31 minutes, but 20 to 25 is where you're going to see him regardless most nights. And it's obviously a great matchup against the Lakers. So if you kind of need that punt play, Mills can certainly hit there. He's averaged 27 DK points in 3 games against the Lakers this season. So not a big minutes guy, but it's not a value spot tonight at point guard. He's kind of your only option.
Right. And again, this is a pretty unique slate because they've had so much time off compared to what a normal slate would be. The injuries are a little bit different than normal.
Yeah. Moving over to shooting guard, and you're looking at guys. Dwayne Wade, somehow he's already sore coming off of like the All-Star break. So, but he is probable tonight, and not in play for me just because he's going up against the Hawks. Should see a bump in usage as well with Bosh out, but there's a lot of guys I like around him a little bit more. As far as other injuries go, I mean, there's actually not much to look at. So Courtney Lee, he's with Charlotte now. Curious to see his minute situation. I don't think it's going to be there against Milwaukee yet. I think you're probably going to maybe see him get worked in a little bit more, but it's a pretty clean save for injuries at shooting guard. So
and Jimmy Butler's out, but Etuan Moore has kind of a tough matchup, so he's not really in play with his new and beefy price.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. They were all over that one. Etuan Moore puts up 40 fantasy points, and all of a sudden DraftKings, makes him the face of the site.
Right. But I mean, James Harden definitely in play for that sort of 70-point tournament, winner type performance. But again, it's kind of tough to fit him in. So if you can find a way, then I'm all for it. But based on everything I'm looking at now, it's going to be tougher to fit him in.
Yeah. And I think Harden is my favorite 10K plus guy tonight.
Mm-hmm.
Just because if you're looking, shooting guards are usually a weak spot most nights, and you're kind of looking, we like a lot of the 6 to 7, 8K range guys anyway. Not so much at shooting guard, where there are a few, but you kind of rather you feel a lot better using your 7K range for the other guys and then paying up for Harden. But like you said, value is kind of iffy tonight, but Harden's been unbelievable over the last 10 games. And of course, his one down game was really against Phoenix on that short slate, but in an up-tempo game like that, you don't expect that to happen again.
Right. Instead of DeRozan and Thompson, I'm kind of looking down to Batum and Middleton, sort of in that 7K range, I think. And I know you're pretty much in agreement here that those two are sort of the ones you're looking at there in that range.
Yeah, no, I definitely am. And you look at DeRozan, he's been solid of late. Thompson has that up and down, nature to his game, but Middleton and Batum just seem to be far more consistent. I like the matchup for both of them in this game, and we were kind of saying that's the contrarian game to really target, and those two really stand out to me as the guys to grab tonight, especially in cash games. I think they're pretty safe cash game plays if you're doing that balanced lineup.
Mm-hmm. And I'm okay with CJ McCollum, but he does have sort of a lower ceiling than those two. So probably not in the cards tonight, but I do think he's an intriguing option.
Yeah. If you look, you're kind of banking on Portland to keep it close, and it's obviously going to come back from the backcourt with Lillard and McCollum. You don't see anyone else in the front court really keeping this one close. So if you're banking on Portland keeping it close, you're obviously going to want to get some shares of Lillard and McCollum, but I'm kind of iffy on that upside McCollum brings for tournaments. I'm not sure it's quite there, but if it could be if he goes up, because obviously the usage has shifted so much towards both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But skip it down a little bit. Devin Booker, both their prices, him and Archie Goodwin, are up in that low 6K range, and I like Booker a little bit more because obviously shooting guard's just a lighter spot, but Booker's the price is kind of iffy. It's making me think
he's getting up there. And again, we've mentioned this before, but it was a lot more fun when these guys were sort of in the 4K, just innocent times when we could just throw him in there automatically. I do think he's a pretty safe play. Definitely a nice cash game option. And I do think he has some of that tournament upside as well. But yeah, his price is definitely getting up there.
Yeah, like you mentioned, back when they were in that cheaper range, when they got 25 fantasy points, it didn't really kill you because they were still hitting value. Now, not so much, especially on a slate like tonight. So I think that's the one concern I have where it's a little bit iffy. So I still think Booker's in play. I do like Booker over Goodwin just because of the position difference.
Mm-hmm.
But looking cheaper, Will Barton, still a great tournament play. The minutes are always fluctuating, but obviously he's a really high fantasy points per minute player. As we've seen, he just played 22 minutes against Detroit and went for 35 DK points. So obviously against Sacramento, he's going to be in play with this matchup. I think in all formats for me.
Yeah, and his price is solid. So his upside still makes a lot of sense for that price. So yeah, tournaments and cash games. I do like him more for tournaments, but yeah, he's definitely in play for cash as well at that price.
Yeah. If you're looking a little cheaper, I mean, obviously you mentioned Etwan Moore. Um, your dog, not a big fan of Etwan Moore, as we can hear in the back. But obviously, Evan Fournier with Tobias Harris out of town. Ilyasova was coming in, but I still think Fournier is going to see a pretty big bump in minutes. I think you're going to see Ilyasova may play in that 25-minute range still. It's always impossible with Scott Skiles, so I'm not really sure.
I mean, there's been a few times this year where he's literally just benched his starters in the first quarter, but I don't think you can go into a slate thinking about that. Yeah, Fournier's been playing a ton of minutes lately, and he hasn't necessarily been translating that to like crazy success. But even a dip in minutes, he's still a decent price at 5,400.
Yeah, and obviously it's a nice matchup against the Dallas backcourt that's been average defensively. They're not great, but nothing special. So I think it's a pretty average matchup. I think Fournier is kind of the safer guy if I'm taking anyone from the Orlando Tobias trade. And we'll talk about Aaron Gordon later, but I think that's going to be a wait and see approach because we kind of forgot to mention Brandon Jennings, but they wanted to get him for some reason. So I'm curious to see how those minutes shake up. But that backcourt of Elfrid Payton Jennings and Oladipo is not one to play tonight.
Absolutely not. Hold on.
So I'll talk about shooting guards a little lower. And you look at some guys who have played bigger minutes, and Gerald Henderson's been playing a little bit more, 32, 35, 27, and 24 over the last 5 games there. And he's putting up some decent points, and you kind of like the matchup in a higher price. And welcome back. I'm talking about Gerald Henderson.
Hey, yo. All right, we're good. Yeah, he's been pretty solid lately. Not necessarily the tournament upside, but he has been getting more minutes, and he's in that 4,300 range. So if you're kind of looking to open up something, he's definitely interesting.
Yeah. As we mentioned, if Bayless does sit, he is questionable. OJ Mayo would sit there at 4,200. Certainly see a bump in minutes. You could expect him near 25. Who's kind of worked more of his point guard. I kind of like the role he takes on when he is out there on the court. So I like Mayo as kind of that all-around producer if he does get in. And obviously the matchup would be nice against Charlotte.
Definitely.
I mean, if you're looking any lower, it's not pretty. So you kind of want to stick in that mid-range. And I think Henderson, maybe Mayo are kind of the lowest tier options you can go. Do you agree?
Yeah. I don't think you're really looking too low at point guard and shooting guard tonight.
Yeah. Moving to a small forward, and of course it's a stacked position tonight, and Kevin Durant sitting over 10K. The OKC Indiana game does have a nice total, and it's weird because I think constructing lineups I don't have a ton of exposure to. So
yeah, it just doesn't seem to make sense. I think you can make it work, but you're more forcing it right now. Unless some information comes about that someone's randomly out and it makes a 3K punt play an option, this is a little tougher to fit these guys in tonight.
Yeah. You obviously look at Westbrook and Durant, they're going to be the easy plays, but both over 10K on a 14-game slate, if they just go for 50-55, it's hurting you more than it's helping you. So obviously they would both have to go for 60 plus to really kind of make a tremendous difference. But I like Paul George as a contrarian play. He's still got a lot to prove, and at that price tag against Durant, it's going to be a showdown. Going to be a fun one to watch. So you kind of can play that narrative where they go against each other. And, as we saw with Paul George and Curry, I mean, they both battled and went off for 60 plus fantasy points. So you kind of maybe put that game theory into play and hope that happens.
And because I like George, it kind of makes it more difficult to play Melo for 400 more. I think George has the same upside and maybe even a little higher floor because of the game he's playing in. So I think you can kind of cross out Carmelo unless you're looking to be a little more contrarian.
Yeah, I mean, you're digging deep if you're playing Melo, and as for the reasons mentioned, just one, George is cheaper and a higher scoring pace game against OKC, but there's plenty of guys at small forward tonight sitting in that range.
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll just go down the list here of Kawhi Leonard, Gordon Hayward, Giannis, Alphabet, Greek Freak, whatever you want to call him, Gallinari, Ariza, all kind of equals to me tonight. I can't get a pretty distinct one over the other. I think they all sit with a pretty safe floor and all have decent upside and all sit in just great matchups.
Yeah, I like all of them. I mean, Gallinari sticks out to me against the Kings. I like Giannis. I mean, I really just like all four of those players, and it just promotes that balanced lineup even more, you know?
Yeah, I think, you're sitting in that range if you want to sit in there all night, because we'll continue power forward and center. We'll even make more of a case for a balanced lineup tonight, even with all the stars on the slate, because there are a lot of 6K to 7K range guys. But if you had to pick one, if you're building 10 lineups, who's going to be in the most? Who do you see as kind of your core small forward guy?
I like Gallinari. I think he's, especially in a cash game, I love his floor. And I do think he has the tournament upside tonight because he's playing Sacramento.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely with you there. I mean, on the road at Sacramento, it's going to be a high-scoring game. I do like Ariza just for a little bit more of a discount. I think he's not as safe as floor, but obviously you're paying down a little bit, so the floor is lowered. But obviously in a matchup against Phoenix, one of the higher-paced teams, both these teams play at phenomenal rates. So Ariza is kind of an interesting play at 6,100.
Definitely.
But if you're looking lower, our always friendly PJ Tucker.
Oh, man. We're still laughing about him.
Yeah, we're never not going to be laughing at PJ Tucker, that's for sure.
But he is in play tonight. You kind of just go, yeah, okay.
14-game slate, who the hell would have thought PJ Tucker would be in play? But if you need that cheaper guy, he's 46, and 38 minutes in the last 3 games, went 36 DK points against Houston. No Markieff Morris, so the usage is going to shift around. And I guess you could say Tucker is the safer non-guard out of Phoenix, and I don't feel good saying that, but it is.
We'll call him a viable play and move on.
Yeah, he's in play, but get the Pepto-Bismol already, because it'll be a fun time. But
so and then you move down to 5,100 and you're looking at Joe Johnson, who if
you really want to feel sick.
He literally had 2 fantasy points last game he played in 23 minutes, which I don't even know how that's possible. But in the last 10 games or so, he's shown a ton of upside and he's shown a ton of downside. So you're looking at him as sort of that tournament flyer. He's had a 60-point fantasy performance in the last 4 games. So that upside is there, not that high, but he's kind of been having that good inconsistency lately. So that's someone to throw in there in a tournament.
Yeah, especially in a home matchup against New York. And Joe Johnson kind of shows up for these big games at times. So it's kind of nice to see, as we saw that with Indy a few games ago with Paul George. So he went 29-4. He's had decent success. He's averaged 27 fantasy points in 2 games against the Knicks. You'd obviously like to see that be a little bit higher for tournaments, but I do like him at that price just with his upside, but far from cash game play for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Looking a little bit cheaper, we talked about the Heat situation, and Luol Deng and Justice Winslow, both in a matchup against the Hawks. I do like Deng just a little bit more. The usage, I'm just curious to see. It's probably going to be one to really monitor, one that's going to be a popular one around the DFS industry, just because we don't know. I mean, I'm really curious to see how this goes without Bosh.
Right, because they don't have like the pieces to run sort of a higher paced offense, but what are they going to do now? You know, like Bosh was such a huge part to that team, and now you just kind of take him out of there. They kind of got to regroup and figure something out quickly. So playing Deng at the 4 could make things interesting.
Yeah, and I think, especially tomorrow with no Whiteside, they're going to have to fill two roles now down at the big man spots. So um, the Hawks aren't particularly huge anyway down low, so you're kind of looking, this is probably what's going to happen. You're going to see a lot of Deng at the 4. Curious to see who even plays the 5 tomorrow for more than half the game. But and that kind of puts the Hawks bigs in play. I mean, Horford's not a big guy, but he's going to take advantage of a team with no Whiteside or Bosh.
Right.
But if we're looking cheaper,
Corey Brewer,
yeah,
400.
Yeah.
Houston against Phoenix. I mean, pretty much everyone on Houston is in play other than Omer Asik. Or not Omer Asik. He's not on Houston anymore. That's awkward. We're just going to keep talking. Anyway, so Corey Brewer, decent play at 4,400. And that's all I have to say on that.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking at the minutes, 23, 28, 28, 25, 33, 30 over that last 5 stretch before the break, he had some tougher matchups heading into the break with Portland twice seeing Aminu. That's not a good matchup for Brewer whatsoever. Play Golden State still not a great matchup. But going up against that Phoenix, he got hot, shot 9-12 from the field. Phoenix just doesn't play defense whatsoever. So I like Brewer's a nice punt play. And I think blowout or even a close game, Brewer's a safe bet for 25 minutes at the least.
Definitely.
Here's where we're kind of getting to the wait and see approach, but Mirza Teletovic could see a bump in minutes. He's played 20 in each of the last 3 games, but that's about it. 24, 18, and 20 fantasy points. I'm going to take a guess that he's the guy who gets the bump with Morris out as far as minutes go. But guessing minutes is always not fun.
No, especially with that sort of roster construction. It's just kind of a glum situation, so you don't really know how they're going to handle it.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of more of a, if you're trying to be really bold tonight, maybe Teletovic works. Maybe he works out, and if he does, I'll put my PayPal info in the comments box, and you can throw me a tip, because you heard it here.
There you go.
But moving over to power forward, and all 3 guys up top are really, they're in play if you can fit them into your lineups, and it's DeMarcus Cousins, it's Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis below 10K is intriguing, as well as Draymond Green. So Boogie at 11K is really pricey.
Yeah, all 3 have nice matchups. Draymond, I probably like Draymond price considered the most. I think I would like Davis if I felt like he was playing to the level of what I considered Anthony Davis, but he really hasn't been doing that for quite a while now. But I think this has the potential to be a Draymond game against Portland, sort of a Western Conference foe. And for 9K, that price difference kind of makes a difference for lineup construction tonight.
Yeah, I think if you look at Green, if you want some Warriors exposure, we haven't really been on board with Warriors exposure tonight, but Green's kind of the guy. He's the cheaper guy out of Curry, a little bit safer than Thompson, and also kind of more of a contrarian move tonight because it hasn't been that great of late. I mean, matchup against Phoenix, just 22. Matchup against Houston, where I think we were all on him, only had 25 and 36 against OKC. So obviously triple-double upside he brings each night, but I expect him to rebound here against Portland and their front court. But I mean, more about that mid-K range that we like, and that's starting with Porzingis. We'll start with, and his tournament upside for a cheap price.
Yeah, definitely love that matchup, and he's been playing pretty consistently since he came back from that injury. He's pretty much starting to take. I won't say the main contributor role on that offense, but he's definitely coming into his own as sort of not a star, but a strong contributor,
Yeah, I mean, if you look at Porzingis and you look at his shot attempts, 14, 23, 12, since coming back from that injury where he left early, he's been producing. And, I mean, obviously the block upside is always there, 3, 2, 6 in the last 3 games, and double-doubles in 2 of the last 3. But, I mean, a matchup against Brooklyn, they're below average in rebounding, and, they rank in the bottom 10 in, field goal percentage allowed. So Porzingis is definitely in play for me tonight. I just don't think on a big 14-game slate he's going to get lost.
Right. Absolutely.
So
you look at Randolph, you look at Favors, you look at Aldridge. That 7K range again is looking really nice.
Yeah, I'm definitely on board. As you mentioned, Randolph, nice matchup there against Minnesota. They're, kind of an average defensive team down low, but certainly Randolph's going to get the bigger usage with Gasol out. Aldridge been much more consistent. He's kind of found his own DFS wise in the Spurs rotation because we've been kind of waiting for that consistency for a long time, and it's finally happening. And below 7,000, he's definitely in play. But I think Favors might be my guy tonight in that range.
He definitely. You look at that matchup against a weaker Boston front court, and he definitely has that tournament upside. He won't. I don't think he'll be too high owned. But he's definitely sort of underpriced for what he is, even just in a regular sort of rotation.
Yeah. I mean, when he puts everything together, you're looking at a monster upside because you look at the last year games, hasn't had any blocks in the last 3, but he's, put up 39 and 36 fantasy points in that span. So when he puts everything together, which he should do tonight against Boston, I mean, watch out. The guy can go for 40, 45 plus in fantasy points. So, and maybe, hopefully,
Absolutely.
Boston can push the pace a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, you go just a little bit lower. You have Thaddeus Young and Gorgie Dang sitting there at 6,700. This is just power forward is loaded tonight in those mid-range options.
Yeah, and you're looking at the big men. You're looking on DK. There's a lot to do with center and power forward tonight where they should find about 5 of them in your lineups. I mean, It's kind of looking that way, but I like Dang. I like him now that he's a power forward. I barely noticed that before the show. You had to point it out. I was like, well, man, I wish he was a power forward. And you're like, wait, he is.
Yeah. So it's perceived as a tougher matchup against Memphis, but with no Gasol, it kind of changes the whole dynamic there, and then Jeff Green's gone as well. So,
yeah, Memphis is not going to be the defensive. They haven't really been that great defensively as they were in the past years. Coming into the season,
right.
But still, I mean, it's gotten worse for sure. I mean, just continuing the trend here of power forwards, Kenneth Faried, Aaron Gordon, Dirk Nowitzki. Nowitzki just a cash game play, but Gordon, Faried that GPP play with upside. You got like Aaron Gordon here. I mean, no Tobias is going to get up on some offensive usage. Hopefully he's the guy we don't get Skiles, maybe not. Not tonight.
Yeah. And the thing is with him, even in limited minutes, he is just all over the place. Obviously, elite athleticism, and he's been displaying that, I'd say, pretty consistently over the last few weeks. So it's almost like he has a pretty safe floor, too, as long as he gets those minutes. I mean, even if Skiles does that thing where he benches everyone in the first quarter, he's still going to get 25 to 30 minutes. So, yeah, I really like him at his price.
Definitely. If you're going, even cheaper, Amari Stoudemire is really the only logical option I'm considering. At just 4,200, no Whiteside, no Bosh. You saw when Whiteside was out, him have a bigger role of right around 20 to 24 minutes. If he can handle the workload, I could easily see 25 to 28 tonight, and a really nice matchup against Atlanta because they've struggled against centers all season long.
Yeah, I still think his minutes are going to be capped relatively. He's not going to be playing 45 minutes or anything crazy like that. But we have seen, even in the limited minutes he's played, he does contribute pretty quickly,
Yeah. Yeah, if you look at what he did against Atlanta in just 21 minutes the last time out, 13 and 12 with 3 steals and a block. So he's a nice all-around player. It rebounds well. He's going to have a little bit more of a scoring role down low, and the peripheral defensive stats have been there. So it's been nice to see. And I can't see just rostering anyone else in this situation down here other than him. And I think Sotomayor is more, if I'm paying up for a Harden, paying up for a Durant, paying up for a Davis, paying up for a Cousins, Stoudemire is a must play.
Definitely.
So moving over to center, like you said, Whiteside is suspended. Marcus Gasol going to be out for some time. Al Jefferson probable, but I think he's going to be a little bit on a minutes limit coming back from his injury. You were just yelling out Jeff before the show.
That's exciting. I mean, he's been gone for a while. I'm happy to see the big man back.
I love Al Jefferson. I'm a big fan of Al Jefferson, but not DFS wise tonight, but just as a person,
putting him back in the fold. That Charlotte team in general is pretty intriguing, I'd say, with Batum sort of playing well and Kemba, and I kind of like that roster construction a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, they haven't been healthy all year, all at one time. They're still not going to be with Kate Gilchrist out, but
I know.
If Jefferson can get into an old role of his where he's just an offensive machine down low and rebounds well, I mean, they'll be a fun DFS team because obviously it'll be an uptick in assists for Batum and Kemba, so they'll be the big three there.
Definitely.
But looking up top at center, Pau Gasol, Karl Anthony Towns. Towns is definitely in play because there's no Marc Gasol.
Right, you rarely say only 8,500, but he's been on a tear lately. So he's definitely in play at that price. And I mean, borderline cash. He's pretty much guaranteed production. So I really like him at that price.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking, before the break, him playing against Toronto. It wasn't on my radar. I thought he was a little too expensive going up against Valanciunas and Biyombo. I was wrong. Completely goes off. So, and a matchup where he's going to see Brandon Wright for a little bit, going to see Zach Randolph, who can't get off the ground and can't move at all. Towns has just a better than advertised matchup tonight.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Definitely.
I mean, hopefully the average person maybe doesn't see that.
Yeah, and I think people are going to kind of be ignoring these top two options. Gasol as well. I think he's in play even in a tough Toronto matchup. He's just been really good lately, kind of like Towns. They've just both been chugging along pretty much regardless of the matchups. So
yeah, and, as you mentioned with no Jimmy Butler, Gasol's he's him and Rose are the offensive threats. I mean, it's
right.
There's nobody else. But it's
and even with the price difference, you're not really looking at Drummond or Howard tonight. They just don't really make sense. If you're going to pay up, you might as well just pay up for one of those two top options.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, they're in a little bit tougher matchups anyway. And at a similar price tag, you'd just rather pay up for a little bit more safety and higher upside. But as we continue, I mean, we like that middle range there. And starting with Jahlil Okafor, great matchup against New Orleans, playing bigger minutes, finally 39, 30, 33 in the last three games. And he put up 3 monster games before the break, and I think he could certainly do that again against this New Orleans front court.
Stop getting in the bar fights and look at him go. Yeah, no, but at 6,400, it seems like he's definitely undervalued right now. He got off to a rough start this season, but it seems like he's stabilized a little bit, and this is a nice spot for him.
Yeah, great matchup, great price, a nice little track record coming out of the break there. So I think he's a great option tonight. I think your best fantasy points per dollar play on the board. You could argue his consistency is a little off, but I think for that price, he's a pretty safe play tonight.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Look at some other guys in that range. Love Greg Monroe. I like Al Horford. Like Rudy Gobert against that weak Boston front court. It's going to be tough. I think Okafor is the easy play, but I think Okafor is my main guy, and then I maybe roster some other centers around him on DK, of course.
Yeah, and do we think Horford has tournament upside? Maybe not, but I think he's a really nice cash game play at the least. I mean, we just talked about that Miami sort of situation right now. This could be a big night for him.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Horford. I mean, he's dominated Miami this season in 3 games. I mean, he's averaged 15, 7 and 3, about 35 DK points per game. So that's a really nice floor for him at that price. And yeah, I think the tournament upside may be a little bit not there as far as compared to guys like Okafor. I think a cash game play would be definitely for Horford, just moving him around if you want to put him at the util spot.
Definitely.
Looking a little bit lower, I'm a big Alex Len fan. Curious to see what his new role here is in with Markieff Morris. We have seen Alex Len play at the 4 at times, but I think with Houston's size, I don't see it much happening tonight. But I'm curious to see how he plays without Morris, if he gets any bump in minutes at all, because he's been great this season when he has played big minutes.
Right. They've been a little tentative with him, but points per minute, he's been pretty awesome this year. So at that price, if you're looking to pay down and maybe pay up somewhere else, that's definitely in play.
Yeah. One more cheaper option, and it's Andrew Bogut. With no Ezeli, we've seen them play 23 minutes last game and 29 the game before. I think you could see maybe more towards 29 because that Phoenix game after Houston was on the back-to-back, and they're always going to be careful with Bogut. So I think 25 minutes is a pretty good stand for him tonight, and a matchup against Portland's a great spot for him to do some damage, especially with his defensive peripheral stats.
Yeah, no, this is a really nice play, especially at 4,400. He's just – when you consider those last 2 games and then Ezeli being out, there's just so much opportunity down low for him that it's pretty hard to ignore that price. That's the guy sort of, if you're paying up for a Harden or something like that, that's kind of the guy you're trying to fit in there down low.
Yeah, I mean, 11 blocks and 5 steals in the last 3 games, so he's going to give you that nice floor, and he's always going to grab nearly 10 rebounds when he sees 20-plus minutes. So I'm a big fan of Bogut. I think he's one of my favorite value plays tonight. So that's going to wrap things up here for our monster 14-game slate review.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, I'm going to go take a cold shower.
I'm gonna go. You take a cold shower. I'm gonna go cry in the shower, and then we will regroup tomorrow.
Yeah, but check out Daily Fantasy Cafe for all our great tools and content.